Okay, presentation today, JF and I are going to have a little duel. We're going to talk about a couple different airplanes. One that I'm going to talk about is an old airplane. JF's going to talk about one that's a little newer. Basically, airliners that have done some experimental things that, as an Experimental Aircraft Association, we don't always think about jumbo jet airliners going out there and doing strange things. Most of you remember Tex Johnson back in the late 50s over Seafair, taking the Dash 80, which was the prototype for the 707, and doing a nice roll down over the lake with 100,000 people watching. You know, the CEO of Boeing at the time called him in the office the next day and said, "You could have broke the company." He says, "But congratulations." Sold a lot of airplanes. Well, the DC-8, the 707, some of you might remember the Convair 880s and 990s. And these were, in the US, were the three early airliners, the four-engine airliners that were breaking ground and doing a lot of things. They were all basically early 1950s technology. They were pretty basic airplanes to begin with. The DC-8, which is here, a lot of different models. This is a 43 series, actually. In this picture, that's a 43 series. They started DC-10 series, 10s, 20s. Most people remember the 30 series early on. That's what United had a lot of. They looked exactly like that. The difference was the 30 series had Pratt & Whitney engines, and the 40 series had Rolls-Royce. Then we went into more modern engines in the 50, 60, and then eventually the 70 series. But what made the 40 series unique is there wasn't that many of them with the Rolls-Royce engines. The initial company that ordered them was TransCanada Airlines. Alan here, did you fly the DC-8?
Yes.
Yeah. So they initially came out as a 41 series airplane. And then Canadian Pacific Airlines, which was the other flag carrier, also bought the same airplane. Idea being that possibly they could do aircraft exchanges where they'd have one name painted on one side, another name painted on the other, and they could share each other's airplanes for efficiency. It didn't work out, never happened, but Canadian Pacific was primarily doing long haul in the Pacific. Air Canada was mostly doing transatlantic flights. So the 41 series airplane worked for them. But going across the ocean to Tokyo, Douglas sold Canadian Pacific Airlines the idea that this airplane would make it from Vancouver to Tokyo. Well, it didn't. So they tried some real interesting things. At first, they said, well, we won't retract the inboard flaps fully. We'll leave the trailing end flaps out just a little bit so the airplane would get up on the step and it'd be more fuel efficient. That didn't work either. So back to the drawing board, and they come up this aircraft, which was the fourth one being built for Canadian Pacific Airlines. They increased the leading edge. They built up the leading edge between the inboard engines and the fuselage, and they put another fuel tank in there. So they called it a 43 series. And so we had main tanks, alternate tanks, and leading edge alternate tanks. So there were 10 fuel tanks in that airplane. So it made it to Tokyo once in a while, but not very often. Most of the time, like everybody else, stopped in Anchorage for fuel in the day. But that was the way it was. But when this airplane, when they built this one and from the factory added that, what they called a 4% leading edge and that extra fuel tanks, they had to recertify it. So that meant, you notice US registration on this airplane. The Douglas guys had to fly it. They couldn't fly a Canadian registered airplane on their licenses, so the US registered it temporarily. And they went out and went through the whole certification stuff all over again. They ran it up to about Mach 0.95 and did this, made sure all the parts stayed on. And the guys that were doing the test flying said, you know, there's Boeing did a roll in their 707. What could we do with the DC-8? Somebody says, well, why don't we put it through the sound barrier? You know, we ran it up to 9.5. Why not go to 1.01? So they sat and did a little bit of math and gathered a team around and figured it out. And they decided, they called the guys over at Edwards Air Force Base, do you think we could get a couple of chase planes to get this all certified and have everything work? And they went out on August 21st, 1961 to go do the flight. The story is kind of interesting because the night before they were supposed to take this airplane out, somebody drove a piece of equipment into the leading edge. Oh, no. Yeah. Now, if you remember like the 727, the 707, they had all this stuff coming out the leading edges. They called them leading edge devices, slats and Kruger flaps and everything else. The DC-8 didn't have any of that, but it did have what they called slots, and they only opened when you put the flaps out. So actually these cables pulled the skin just in behind the leading edge and opened up some slots to get the airflow between the pylons running a little smoother. Well, that's what the guy hit. So they've got this airplane in Long Beach. They come out the next morning and they can't use the flaps because this slot is damaged. So they decide, well, we'll do a no flap takeoff. Just pause there. There's a newer. A Tecnam, Italian built. That one's out of Alaska. Anyway, so they decide to do a no flap takeoff, which, you know, the airplane's going to be pretty light because there's not going to be any people in it. There's no seats in it. They just got a little bit of fuel to go out and do this flight. The problem is on these airliners is with the rudder. When you have flaps down, when you're flying slow, you got more rudder travel. When you get going fast, they don't want to have that much rudder travel because you could damage the airplane, so there's a rudder limiter. So this takeoff out of Long Beach, if they had had an engine failure, they'd have lost the airplane. But they decided, wow, we're just test pilots, we can go do this anyway. So they took off, they met up with a 104 and an F-100 up over Edwards Air Force Base, and normally a DC-8 could go to 41,000 feet. That was, and I've been up there I flew up for 10 years, I was up 41,000 once, just in time to start down. You know, you had to be really light to get up there. They took it up to 52,000 feet. It was at the time a record for an airliner for altitude capability. They got it.
Altitude.
Sorry?
Cabin altitude.
They didn't care. Probably had oxygen masks on. Anyway, up at 52,000 feet, and they decided, okay, now they had it all figured out. We're going to put this thing into a bit of a dive. And at 45,000 feet, we're going to go supersonic. So let me see if I can get this slide up here. And try and hit 45,000 feet to try and go through the sound barrier, which they did do. The interesting thing is on that previous slide, that 104, it was being flown by Chuck Yeager. So anyway, they go down, they descended, the flight engineer on the airplane was the one that was calling out the indicated airspeeds as they were descending. They were descending at 500 feet per second from 52,000 feet. The airplane was falling out of the sky. So down they come. At 45,000 feet, they actually had all the data. They got the record. And this airplane, actually, this airframe is in the Guinness Book of World Records as the first supersonic transport. Everybody remembers the Tu-144 and the Concord. They weren't until 1969. This was 8 years ahead of them. They went supersonic. So, you know, the crew here, they had a 4-man crew on the airplane, and the chase pilot was Chuck Yeager. Let's see if I can make this thing work some more. And there's a photo of these guys sitting in that airplane. I got to fly this airplane for 8 years. 8 years after it went through the sound barrier, I flew it for another 8 years. Interesting, no side effects. This airplane flew just as good as anything else. But when the guys were going down, they said they got a little bit of buffet just before they broke the sound barrier. And then coming out of it, they got a little bit of buffet. They tried to bring the airplane out. The DC-8 and most of the jets, when you trim the airplane in pitch, you don't have trim tabs. The whole stabilizer moves. So the stabilizer was sitting there, and they tried to trim it, little nose up, stalled the trim motor. They couldn't untrim it. So what they had to do, the guy was actually smart enough, he pushed further forward, unloaded it, and then started trimming it out. So they figured something out about the DC-8 at that time, is if it got going too fast, you couldn't get it out of a dive unless you went the wrong way. So they put on, you would know, as a pitch trim compensator.
TC.
So they had a little, what we called it the snake, up the first officer's control column. There was a little tube, and then out of it there was a little colored tab that would come up. If you started flying along in the DC-8 and for some reason it got going too fast, it actually pulled the control column back with the autopilot, and so it would unload the stab. But they figured it out from this flight that they had to do something to solve that issue on the DC-8. So all the DC-8 versions after that, they were all modified and everything was put on.
The angle of descent.
They didn't talk about it, they just talked, it was 500 feet per second. I mean, it was just, well, you know, you didn't have to put the nose down very far because the wing was virtually stalled up there anyway at 52,000 feet. They were just rocketing out of the sky. So,
Bob, did they experience any, or did they mention experiencing any difficulty at all during the flight because of that damage to the leading edge?
No. It was just they couldn't use the flaps. So then they had to come back and do a flapless landing too. So, but again, being really light, it didn't, I mean, the DC-8 had a wing on it like a Super Cub. I mean, it was like gigantic at the leading edge, and you know, it was actually, it was an Armstrong airplane. You know, there was hydraulic assist, but everything on that airplane ran on cables. Everything. You grab a fuel lever, you pull it down, you were pulling a cable to change a valve. You know, I mean, there was nothing electronic moving anywhere. It was all cables all over the place, running all over. I mean, these are antiques. There's only one DC-8 in the world flying right now, and that's NASA have one. And it's the last one in the sky. But they were a good old beast. You know, the 63 series, the stretch DC-8, you know, you take the control column and roll into an approach, and it was like you're grabbing a bull by the horns and twisting its neck, and a little while later the body would roll over. You know, it wasn't like you hear these guys now, and it just goes. But we had the V-bar flight directors in the 63, and you couldn't follow them until you got on the approach because it was too late. You know, it would be moving and you couldn't get there, couldn't stay with it. But,
Did it have control tabs like the 9?
sorry?
Did it have control tabs like the 9 to control the ailerons and stuff?
No, it was just cables. It was just, I never flew the DC-9. Here's a DC-9 specialist over here.
So what you're saying, if they put big enough engine in it, we could have had a supersonic airliner before we did.
Oh yeah. This thing went that fast. But you know, the Rolls-Royce engines were a little unique to the Pratt engines. There's engine pressure ratio is what most of the engines at that time they set power on. That was the difference in the pressure going in the front of the engine and out the back. So it was usually around 2.0, 2.1 in that range. So you'd set these little bugs on the engine pressure ratio, and you'd put the engine up to that power, and that's what your takeoff thrust was. Well, on the Rolls-Royce engines, you set the bugs, that was the minimum you could get, and you took it and you went whap right to the firewall, and you just took what you got. Now, they were just like super noisy and super thirsty, and it was actually one of the first fan bypass engines. The big 747s, 777s, they got 60–70% fan bypass. So that air that doesn't go through the burning part of the engine, it goes around the outside. The Rolls-Royce Conway engine had 0.3% fan bypass. We're the first fan engine. So, but I got a little question for you after all this talking. So, how fast do you indicated airspeed? How fast do you think they were going at 45,000 feet when they hit 1.01? Anybody got an idea?
The indicated airspeed.
The indicated airspeed, not the true, not the calibrated, indicated.
215, I'll guess.
Okay. Well, there's the. See, you said 215.
15, yeah, 215. That's my guess.
Yeah, the air would be less dense. Way up.
It's gonna be pretty close to 215, yeah.
Actually, it was 293. So, in calculation, at 37,000 feet at Mach 0.80 is 260 knots. 6 knots per thousand, 4 knots per Mach number. So, when they went up to 52,000, I mean, they were way back in here at 52,000 at whatever Mach 0.80, something in there. But when they hit 1.0, they were up to 293.
So
That's where
they know how fast they were going. They didn't hook it into a GPS.
They had calibrations. You got a Mach meter, and the Mach meter isn't as sensitive as an indicated airspeed. So everything would be, all the test equipment they had, plus they had the 104 chase plane.
The 104 stay with them all the way, or?
Yeah. Yeah, the 104 and a 101 on the other side. So that was that's a brief DC-8 course, but as you can see, it was an old airplane. I got to fly this airplane a lot. I had a couple of interesting flights. I got to do a 3-engine ferry on it once. So we had an engine out, and we had all kinds of different procedures and stuff, but we flew it from Winnipeg to Vancouver on 3 engines. And yeah, a little asymmetric thrust, but then you adjusted for that. And then another flight, I got to fly it unpressurized from Edmonton to Vancouver because they found a suspected bullet hole in the airplane. So that was actually on that airframe. So a couple of interesting different things that.
They didn't call me.
Was it a bullet hole?
I have no idea. They just found this hole in the airplane, and it looked like a bullet hole, and instead of going to Amsterdam, we took it back to Vancouver. So,
Bob, any idea what NASA is using this aircraft for now?
Yeah, they go fly it into areas of severe weather. They go up high with it, fly it in areas of severe weather, and got all kinds of test equipment on the inside for looking and analyzing. The last time I saw it on flight radar was over the Olympic Peninsula. There was a big storm coming through the Pacific Northwest, and they were out there with actually one of the early high altitude airplane.
The U-2?
U-2. They had a U-2 and the DC-8 out there flying around over that storm.
So it's a storm chaser now.
Does that one have the CFMs on it now?
Well, this one wouldn't have anything. They put the CFMs on the 60 series airplanes, but they're all parked as well. They're all done. I mean, that airplane, I haven't flown it in 45 years. So you can see how long ago it was.
GPS converted all theirs to CFMs.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the most we ever had on this was INS, and that was conversion. Yeah. No, it's inertial navigation was a little bit better than a navigator. It sort of told you where it thought you were. See, JF, you got something more modern to talk about.
Well, you know, they say you go to the bar, and they go, what'd you drive? I drive an 18-wheeler. That's what we're gonna talk about. My 18-wheeler.
While that EAA paper was going around, I discovered an interesting benefit to the EAA membership recently, and that is the EAA is part of the STEM organization, and with the EAA membership, you get free admission to a whole range of STEM museums. Museum of Flight, Science World in Vancouver, I think one of the zoos.
Move all this stuff. There's the HDMI.
It's free, so you know, a person, their spouse, and their grandkids, all can get in free. It's really great.
Just for the EAA membership?
EAA membership, all you do is show them your EAA membership card with a valid expiration date, and then it lets you right in as if you were a member of that museum of Flight or whatever. Works really good. Great benefits. Oh, yeah, you gotta be 90 miles away from your home museum.
Oh, here, JF.
Just above your button on your shirt.
I finally found my membership.
So as long as you're 90 miles.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
All right, so we talked about the oldest experimental airplane. How about we talk now about the biggest experimental airplane? Literally, it is an experimental airplane. Some people might have described it as, what the hell is that? You know, there's competitors, there's Boeing and there's Airbus, right? So Airbus came with their version, and we'll see a little bit of that, and Boeing came with their version. So yeah, it is a Frankenstein, unfortunately. It's basically built, so therefore it is an experimental airplane with an N registry number on it. So that's what I'm going to talk about, the Boeing Dreamlifter, operated by Atlas Air. So we're going to go into the stats of all that airplane, the altitude, and believe it or not, and that's also going to talk about it, if you make a guess, how much cargo do you think this thing can hold? Compared to, like, say, a regular 747.
Weight or cubes?
You said the magic word. You read my lecture or what? So yeah, so therefore, if you basically look at this, and yet to preclude what you just said, that thing looks big, but carry less cargo than regular 747 because it's not meant for weight, it was meant for volume. So that's why it carries less distance, less gas. So, and that's why they had to do all the modifications. So we'll talk about that. There's a couple of videos. What we're going to talk about first is going to be the what, the why, the where, the how, and the who. So that's what the lecture is going to be like. So that's what it looked like when they pulled it out. When they modified it. So basically, and they'll talk about it in the video that I'm going to show, it is a 400 series, highly modified 400 series. So you can tell the only thing they did basically is the top part is pretty much new. They just took the top part of a 400 series. They had to modify the tail, take the winglets out, because the winglet, they found out there was instability in the airplane. So it's a 400 without the winglets, without the roof, and they just said, what the hell, Aloha Airline did it once, we can do it too. And they put something on top and they make it bigger. So that's what they did. So.
Question, were those new airplanes? Or
No.
Were they used ones that they.
Used one that they got from China Airline and I think from Eva, I believe. They'll talk about it too.
Yeah, where was the modification done?
It was done in Taiwan.
Taiwan.
Yeah. So what is the Dreamlifter? And that's going to talk about that.
There's 4 of them in the world. They're modified 747-400. They're actually passenger aircraft. So Malaysia Air, China Air, we got them from those guys. Operated and ran by Atlas Air, so we actually contracted them to fly the aircraft. It was modified over an EGAT Type A. It took a few years to do. Essentially what they did is they took a saw, cut off the top, the waterline 600, and then built the structure higher so we were able to withstand our larger payloads like the wings and the on. So everything back of the bulkhead is non-pressurized. Everything from the bulkhead forward is pressurized. The other modifications that we did, we actually took off the wingtips on the outside. We had a little bit of a flutter issue in flight tests, so we took those off and that went away. And then our other modifications, we actually made the tail a little larger, so about a 10-foot increment on the vertical fin to help with weight balance.
What other range for the 747 or LCF like this?
So typically what we'll do, depending on the winds, is we'll fly from our 5 main hubs. So we fly in Everett, Charleston, Wichita, Italia, Italy, and Nagoya, Japan.
All right, let's go check it out.
This is our lower load cargo area. We have 7 of these pallet positions. This is where we haul more of our pieces or smaller end item cargo. So right now we're doing a lot of one-piece frames to Italy, CMK kits to Japan, and we're doing some terminal end fittings for the 777. And now I'll take you on up here to our main cargo deck where we store most of our product during flight, the larger end items.
Okay, following you.
Oh, wow.
So starting up front here, we have this large bulkhead.
Play basketball.
This is our bulkhead that's about 3.5, 4 feet wide to protect the pilots in case of an aircraft emergency. So if we were ever to have a hard landing, the SME that sits on these rails would actually shear loose and go flying into the bulkhead, and it should, in theory, protect the pilots.
Experimental airplane.
Given Boeing's recent history, that would be a question.
Well, every day you got to see something like this. This is something, a technology, architecture model.
So we're back here at the aft of the aircraft. This is where the tail actually swings open, so our swing tail system. So as mentioned earlier, our MTS, or our motor tail support, we have a valve that sits in the back and provides hydraulic power to fully disengage the 21 locks on the inside of the tail. You can kind of see where these actuators or the locks are that make up the 21 that go around the outside of the tail.
Why there is a tail like this? Why this tail is needed like this?
Yeah, so we actually looked at a bunch of different concepts. We looked at either taking off the roof or going through the side. We developed the tail because we felt like it was easier. So we're able to swing open the back side of the tail and get the product in and offloaded in a fairly short amount of time versus the other concepts. The other thing you'll notice on the side here, we have these yellow boxes. So the yellow boxes is a laser guidance system for our loader to make sure that we have a standardized set height for when we're ready to offload the product. So this is an example of the actuators or the locks that make up the inside of the tail. Again, there's 21 of those that lock and unlock the back side of the LCF tail. You can kind of see the crack in the tail right here. This is our end point of where the tail will actually swing out over the left wing. Structure in here. This is typically where we'll store all of our product. Just awaiting for final assembly. So today we have a set of wings over here. We have a 41 from Wichita. We have an aft and then a mid-body from Charleston. So it's all ready to go. It just has to head over to final assembly now for final join and to polish it off. This is the 41 section. Comes out of Wichita from Spirit. We typically we'll do two of these at a time. We typically have a bunch of product overflow in here, and we'll be waiting until final assembly is ready for it. So this is our mid-body section right here. So this is a conjoinment of the 43 section out of KHI in Japan, the 44 section out of Italy, and then the 46 section out of Italy as well. So it goes to Charleston as 3 pieces, gets conjoined into one major large piece, and then gets shipped to Everett for final assembly here. So typically it takes up about the entire rack. During flight, this would be the only production article that would be flying on the Dreamlifter at that time. And this is the aft section, the 46 48 is made in Charleston. Gets shipped here to Everett, Charleston and be built there. Some of them are sent here, stored on our rack. So
And to update that video, they don't make 787 out of Everett anymore. So it's all made out of Charleston, unfortunately.
We go over there, collect the Dreamlifter, and pick it up, and we bring it here to Everett or on to Charleston, wherever the final destination is for our final assembly. So typically be out here for a day or two.
That's good enough. All right. So update to that video, like I said, they don't make 787s anymore out of Everett. It's all made out of Charleston. And the funny part about this, and we'll talk that into the who, is you ever heard this expression, the chicken or the eggs? We'll talk about that. Anyway, some of the data that we're looking at, so it's 215 feet wide, and it's 235 and 2 inches long. So what they did here on that, the tail, it's an SP tail actually. That's why it basically gets taller. If you notice, the SP is a taller tail, 10 feet taller, and that's what they did for that because of the basically the aerodynamics for the fuselage. They had to adapt and overcome for that. Okay, so some of the data right here, it's a little hard to see. So basically, they're comparing the 400 and basically the 74. Let's see if I can make that. Yeah, so make that happen. So we're looking at the cruise. We talked about the length, we talked about the width, and we talked about the, with all that, so you guys can see it. So the wingspan, so we're looking at the wingspan 211. Sorry, can you guys see this pretty good, or is that, you can? Okay, good, excellent, perfect, outstanding. So, we were talking about the operating weight, empty weight right here. So you got over here, the operating weight is 398,000 pounds, and maximum takeoff weight is 803,000 pounds. Cruising speed, it's a slow machine, believe it or not. So we used to call her the drag queen because, literally, because when we went in the FMC, we had to adjust the drag coefficient of that airplane from the regular 747 because of all that aerodynamic braking that we had in the air. So that's why we call her the drag queen. We had to modify that on the FMC. The maximum, we're talking about cruising speed, fairly slow airplane. It flies exactly like a 47, like a regular 400 series.
What is the cruising speed? You never did say.
It's 0.82. So basically what we do here is 0.82, or it's going to be 871 kilometers per hour. So that's our average speed. We never go any higher than that. So regular 7.4, we can go to 8.6. We can push it to 8.6. That thing, no, it doesn't go 8.6. It's pretty much 8.2. If you go any above that, we don't want to find out what's going to happen. Experimental airplane, remember? So that's why we're trying to. So, but like I said, she handles exactly like the maximum takeoff. We're talking about that's 9,000 feet, and fully range loaded, it's 1,200 miles, nautical miles. Fuel capacity, it's 199,150 liter, or we're talking about 52,609 US gallons. So we have less gas than a regular 747. So, and that's why if you're gonna notice, we'll talk about the where, we only go certain destination. And we'll talk about volume again with President Trump. You guys probably heard about that before, what he did in the past. So why the Dreamlifter? There was a reason for that. I mean, why would you build an experimental airplane, a big 18-wheeler experimental airplane? And that's the why. So we want to talk about that.
Why did Boeing build the 747 Dreamlifter? Maybe you've never seen a Boeing 747 Dreamlifter. There are not a lot around, just 4 in fact. The Dreamlifter is the world's longest cargo aircraft. They were built to transport Boeing's 787 parts from Dreamliner suppliers around the globe to Boeing's US factories. Dreamlifter is not only an attention-grabbing name, it's also accurate too. When Boeing began planning for their 787 Dreamliner around 20 years ago, they decided to skip shipping some of their 787 aircraft components by land and sea. It took too long, Boeing argued. Another issue was that many of the Dreamliner's parts would be too big for standard shipping containers. Boeing's 747-400 freighters and the bigger Antonov aircraft would also be too small. Boeing's solution was to convert some existing 747s to act as ferry aircraft. Dreamliner suppliers were located as far afield as Japan and Italy. It was a different era. Could you imagine such an extravagance at Boeing in 2020? Boeing bought 4 747-400s. One came from Air China, another from Malaysia Airlines, and 2 from China Airlines. The reconfigured aircraft were to have a bulging fuselage similar to the equally elusive Super Duffy. The reconfiguration was a joint venture between Boeing
Ours better looking.
and Spain's Gamesa Aeronáutica. They did the reconfiguration in Taiwan using Evergreen Aviation Technologies Corporation. It was truly a global enterprise. The first Dreamlifter, M747BC, rolled out on the tarmac in Taiwan in late 2006. They took it to Boeing's Seattle field to undergo flight testing. The second aircraft, M780BA, made its first test flight in early 2007. Both these aircraft began transporting Dreamliner parts later that year. The wings for the Dreamliner were manufactured in Japan. Overnight, shipping times dropped from a month to 9 hours. Boeing didn't operate the Dreamlifters themselves. They outsourced that to Evergreen. The Seattle-based freight airline lost contract to Atlas Air in 2010 and subsequently sued Boeing. Unfortunately for Evergreen, they lost the lawsuit. By mid-2008, the third Dreamlifter began operating. The fourth Dreamlifter came into service in 2010. Dreamlifter is 235 feet long, whereas the 747-400 is 231 feet long. They have the same wingspans. The Dreamlifter is 70 feet high, whereas the 747-400 is 63 feet high. The Dreamlifter's fuselage is 27 feet wide, whereas the 747-400 fuselage is 21 feet wide. The Dreamlifter's maximum takeoff weight is 364,235 kilograms, which is less than the 747-400's maximum takeoff weight of 396,890 kilograms. The Dreamlifter's range when fully loaded is also less, 4,200 nautical miles, whereas the 747-400's range when fully loaded is 7,260 nautical miles. The Dreamlifter was all about space. Its main cargo compartment has a volume of 1,840 cubic meters, and its maximum payload capacity is 113,400 kilograms. The Dreamlifter was built to carry Dreamliner parts that were too big for conventional shipping means. Cutting supply shipping times and the subsequent decrease in production times were also key factors. That was a generation ago. Things didn't go quite to plan when it came to getting the Dreamliners into the air, but they are a common sight at airports now. What's often overlooked when talking about Dreamliners is the role Dreamlifters played in getting them built.
All right. So where do we fly? So obviously range is a problem. So therefore we cannot do like, let's go to Sydney. What the hell? It's a beautiful day today. Let's take off. We have 18 wheelers. We have lots of fuel. And we can go to Sydney, direct flight from Vancouver or Seattle. Nope, not going to happen. So therefore we pretty much had to be strategically placing a couple of places. Now, one problem you guys may not realize, Boeing for the 787, that's the first attempt of doing a multinational / multi-companies corporation. Airbus been doing it for decades. Boeing, not so much. So therefore, they had to figure it out pretty damn quick if they were going to make it work. Like they said earlier in the video, they said, well, normally they would put everything, because nothing, even the Antonov can fly it, they had to put everything on a barge to be coming from Japan. Took a while, so they said that's why the Dreamlifter was say, hey, here in 9 hours, basically. And they were able to put it into the factory floor. So that was pretty much it. That's why they spend the money, and that's why they build that airplane. That's the big, its time was a factor, basically. So because it's a short range, so we have to strategically plan who's going to be the partner to build this. So it was Japan, Italy, here in Charleston. We have McConnell, which is in Kansas, which is Spirit. We don't want to say that word too high again. I know we're on video, unfortunately, but Spirit, now we don't have any hatch door. That basically we did the communication thing. So we don't have to worry about that. So they basically, there's the modification on the top. So where does it fly?
The Boeing Dreamlifter is one of the most eye-catching planes around. Used chiefly to transport large 787 Dreamliner parts for Boeing, the Dreamlifter is a unique plane to spot at one of the several airports it flies to worldwide. So where does one have the best chances of spotting this jumbo jet? Let's find out in today's video. But first, a tiny bit of background about this type of aircraft. The The Boeing Dreamlifter fleet was conceived as a resolution to the logistical complexities of assembling the 787 Dreamliners. Compared to Boeing's previous projects, many large components of the Dreamliner are manufactured overseas. The size of these parts is restricted for overwater shipping from both a time and size standpoint, and so Boeing decided to convert 4 747-400s into the Mammoth freighter. In case you've yet to figure it out, the Dreamliner project is also where the Dreamlifter found its similar-sounding name. Dreamlifters have a mind-boggling capacity. The volume of its cargo bay exceeds regularly confined 747Fs by nearly 3 times. The plane's weight-bearing capacity, however, doesn't differ much from other 747 freighters. The Dreamlifter fleet is operated by Atlas Air, a US-based airline specializing in global freight and charter services. Dreamlifter is most frequently in and out of Charleston International Airport in South Carolina. Located on the central coast of South Carolina, Charleston is a city that has long been home to US Air Force and Navy installations. The Charleston Airport is a dual-purpose civilian and military airport, home to Boeing's Dreamliner aircraft manufacturing division. As the Dreamlifter was built to support the Dreamliner program, it stands to reason that the unusual-looking cargo jet can most frequently be spotted at Charleston. Since the Dreamlifter's range is limited, Ted Stevens Anchorage International is the second best airport to spot the plane. The airport is a well-known stopping point for cargo operations between Asia and the Americas, and the Dreamlifter takes advantage of Anchorage to refuel and recrew on trips between the US and Japan. Chulu Centrair International Airport, just south of Nagoya, is another hotspot for the Dreamlifter fleet. Not only is the airport a significant cargo hub, but also the location of Boeing's Dreamliner production support facility in Japan. 2 more airports where spotters are likely to see a Dreamlifter are the Taranto-Grottaglie Airport in southeastern Italy and McConnell Air Force Base in Wichita, Kansas. Like Chulu Centrair, Boeing operates extensive facilities dedicated to Dreamliner production in both locations. Taranto and Wichita are primary production locations for the Dreamliner fuselage, so Dreamlifters are scheduled into the airports for pickups on a near weekly basis. And so, to sum it up...
Good. So...
When it's fully loaded,
Yes, ma'am.
how long does the runway have to be before it will lift off?
Very good question. Same status as, same performance as the 400 series. So, yep, same thing. So that's why they made sure of that. They made sure that all, see, very good question, by the way, because the thing is, what did I say when I started this lecture? They didn't want to make it an experimental airplane. It had to be something that's going to fall into, say, only Boeing can operate it under a certain certification number. It had to be a common type they were able to do for training, because if it's basically an experimental airplane, you had to go, well, listen, you have to do specific training for that, you know? Boeing never done that before, right? So anyway, didn't want to say that, sorry for the people that's watching. But anyway, that being said, they wanted to make sure there was a common type. That's why they took the 400 series to take the roof off and extend the tail and put a different roof, but it's still a 400 series. So it falls under the category of 7.4. They call it the Dreamlifter, but it's a 400 series. So that's why they did that. So now, chicken and the eggs. Remember we talked about that before? So what did I fly before I flew that thing? 787. So that's the chicken and the egg. So which one came first? The 747, the 787, or the 747 Dreamlifter? So that's the joke that we have. It says because we've flown the Dreamlifter, my plane that I fly is actually in the back. It's like when you go camping, you open the back of the airplane, take everything out. That was the joke. So that's what we were talking about. We went to a couple of places down in overseas. Where did the crew live? How did they live on the Dreamlifter? Well, that's another story. I'm glad Spirit was not involved. I'm sorry, he was not involved in that. So that's a regular 400 series dash, and pretty much that's our office. It says exactly like I said. It's a 400. It's a 747-400 with the FMCs. You got the DDIs of the screen, the NDs, the PFDs. So all that, and you have your communication here and your alternate over here, or you can basically do it as a standby, or You can do it as where you talk with the company or, you know, a weather and all that stuff. So anyway, so any of that control panel right here, all the systems up here, okay? And that's how you control the airplane. So 400 series basically. And like I said, it behaves like a 7.4. So the pilot dream, hey, you get on 747, wow, right? It's the biggest airplane in the world, ain't it? That's what people think. That's why the pilots are going to be in. They're going to be sitting there, lounging around the big stogie cigar, and they're going to be happy, right? So, the regular 7.4 freighter, that's what we have.
Pretty nice.
Figured my 182.
We're not done yet. So if you notice in the back, that door, there's basically, that's our crew bunk over here. So you open the door, there's crew bunks that's sideways, okay? And we have the 2 sets of first class seat and the galleys right here. That's the stairs to go downstairs to the main cargo deck, okay? That's where we live. During COVID, that was our home. We were not allowed to leave that space whatsoever. So we were 22 to 24 hours in the airplane, no shower. So therefore, that's where we live, and that's where we're basically trying to get along for like that period of time. Interesting concept. So the reality on the LCF, you saw what we saw before, right? That's the LCF. So you cannot be on that main deck. So just to let you know, and we'll talk about this later, they were thinking about this. They were thinking that picture before that you saw with all the red velvet, that's what Boeing wanted. Reality is different. You know, the FAA said, oh, really? So you want to make so the executive can travel in class, big stogie cigar with champagne or cognac? No. The FAA said if you're going to do this, you need to have a flight attendant for that deck because the pilot cannot serve both duties upstairs and downstairs. Put the skirt very quickly, do your service, and go back up and land an airplane. They went, no, you need to have a flight attendant. And Boeing went, no. So they basically opted not to do that. So if they're not going to do that, they're going to say, well, we're not going to do anything for it. So that place is, we tried, don't recommend it, very cold. Because you don't have the air conditioning duct they have upstairs. The only thing we have here is right here, is our emergency equipment that's right here. And that's it. So
I thought it wasn't pressurized.
Again?
I thought that.
I'm going there. I'm going there. I'm going there. I'm glad. Great question, though. So, believe it or not, you're going to basically, our living space, and thank you, we don't do 24 hours like we do with the other 7.4s. This short distance, remember? It's kind of a blessing in disguise. Our alleyway, the living space that we have, is the length of these 2 stables right here. These are the wall, they're right there, are the width of those stables right there, and we have to be 4 people in that space with the cockpit and the crew bunk. That's it. A little cramped for 4 people. So that's the reality. So who flies the Dreamlifter? The 18-wheeler driver, you know, so that's what we pretty much operated, like I said, by Atlas Air. And Evergreen used to have the contract. They lost the contract to Atlas Air. The reason why is we're the biggest operator of 747. And we have our own simulators. We pretty much have our own documentation and manuals. And Boeing said, you know what, keep it simple. Go with these guys instead of reinventing the wheel. They were smart on that one. So this one over here, you can see that in the Museum of Flight. This all the operators of the Dreamlifter were able to sign this model, and it's in display at the Boeing Flight Museum.
How many of you fly it?
Well, it changed because it used to be, I used to be based out of Payne Field. That was as a pilot base. But when Boeing said, we're not building 787s out of Payne anymore, Atlas said, well, we don't need a pilot base over there. So they shut down the pilot base. So we used to be they were all the senior guys, by the way, were dedicated to fly the airplane for itself. So that base was meant for that. So now we're picking out of everybody to be able to qualify on that. And it's a specific, because it is a 400 series, remember to go back to your question, it is a 400 series. So I could pick a guy out of the line and go, hey, you've flown the Dreamlifter, you're qualifying 7.4, come on, let's go. And that's exactly it. It's the same thing. You know, you just need to know, you get a little briefing to say, hey, and that's what we're going to talk about, the question you asked about the pressurization. And we'll talk about that in the next couple of pictures. So this one over here is a great picture to explain that. The pressurized portion is this right here. Everything the nose is pressurized. The rest, not pressurized. There's big holes in the floor, in the tail, that basically is straight out to the air. So it's minus whatever temperature you have up at altitude, that's the temperature back there. That's why we have a really big wall, basically, that keeps us a little warmer up front than it is in the back. And even that, because of that big wall, it's cold in the bottom. That's why the air conditioning is only for the top deck, for that little space that we have. So.
Did you program the FMCs any differently?
Nope, same thing, same. Well, yes, in the past, like I said at the beginning, called the Drag Queen, we had to modify that a little bit because she had some different drag characteristics as the regular 7.4. So obviously, that's my Basco court, so you can see that. You didn't see, there's actually a couple of hoops. No, just, so. Anyway, that's the hump. That's from the escape hatch. So like we said, basically that part right here, that's a better picture. All that is not pressurized. All this is pressurized. So the funny part about this is, and now I'm going back to that one. So where'd you start to walk around? Would you start to walk? FO? Yeah. You have a coffee? Yeah, go. You go to the airplane, I'll be there shortly. So if you basically remember, when you get out of the cockpit, you always start from the left side, right? There's no door on the left side. So there is, but there's a slide to it, and then you don't want to do what some of the airliner people have done is open the slide because of their retirement day and they just slide down the slide. We don't want to do that. So therefore, we have the stairs that goes into the right side of the airplane, and that's where you start your walk around. So do you know what airdrop is for? You guys, who has an iPhone here? No iPhone? But you know what an airdrop, what's the airdrop for?
You can link up to someone and exchange contacts.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we did. That's airdropped. We were at 37,000 feet over the Pacific, and we're basically on the track, and we see the airplane, and we basically get on fingers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and go, hey, you guys have your airdrop on? Yeah. We actually trade pictures at 400 miles an hour, crossing the Pacific. That's what airdrop is for. So you didn't know, now you know. Any question? Go.
I got one.
Go.
2 years ago at Oshkosh, they had I don't know if it was the last 747 made, it was the UPS 747. And that thing was so bloody big, it looked like they came to a 747 and inflated it in every direction.
Is that one?
No, it looked like a 747. It was a brand new airplane.
Well, that last 747, the last 4 off the factory floor came to Atlas Air, and they're 747-8. These ones are the -8 are 1 million pound gross.
The thing was huge.
Yeah, so they're a little bigger, a little longer, and basically they have a little bit more power, a little bit more gas. That's the airplane that goes to Sydney, so we let them have it, so they go for that. William?
When the tail is open, does that have to be supported?
Yes. Did you remember that tractor that they were opening it with? That tractor has to be hooked onto that tail at all time. So the only time the tractor cannot be hooked to that tail is when it's bolted back, like when the hydraulic locks comes in and lock. Beside that, the truck is always connected to the tail.
So even while it's in motion?
Yep, you bet. Well, that's how they open it, actually. It's not a mechanical opening. They literally put the contact onto the airplane. The truck is what's moving the tail. So think about, the hydraulics there would have been so much demand on the hydraulics to have an automatic tail opening with a button in the cockpit. So what they do, it's literally just you open it, you unlock it, and they basically just take the truck, open the tail, close the tail, lock it back up.
Then is there a limit on surface winds when that is opened or loading and unloading?
Yes, 15 miles an hour.
Oh, wow.
We cannot do any kind of loading above 15 miles an hour. And as a matter of fact, so that's actually, it's a great question. Every place at Boeing where we load and offload the Dreamlifter, there's a traffic light that can be seen by everybody. It's right there on the ramp, and it's red, white, and blue. I mean the red, yellow, and green. And those lights actually gives you the red, wind's too high, you cannot load the airplane. Yellow, get ready, we might be doing it. And green, You're good to go, the wind is good.
And what happens if you're in the process in the wind?
If you stop everything.
And just hold what you got?
Yep, that's it. To hold what you got, and mainly what they do, if the wind goes up, like you're loading it, the wind loads up, they finish that loading, close the tail, lock her up. And then you stay there till you basically just say, well, the wind come down, yeah, good, okay, they open it up again and put it in. Same thing for thunderstorms. When you come thunderstorms, you have like all these weather system coming in, same idea. We have to close the tail, lock her up, and get away from the airplane.
How long does that process take?
It takes about 2 hours, ballpark.
To open and close?
No, negative. Open till it's about 10, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, it's open. But the loading is about 2 hours.
And closing also 10?
Same thing, 10 minutes, yeah, 10, 15.
And then has that fuselage ever been damaged during loading or unloading?
I'm not going to especially in the place to say criminate myself without first my lawyer, sir.
It's filled.
Yes? Yes, it's been damaged before, unfortunately, and some of our mechanics, top notch. And it did happen when people would basically drive too close to the airplane, and we end up going back to the hotel. So it happened before.
How are the hydraulics and electrics routed to the tail strip?
So you see what the hinges are? It's all there. It's all part of those hinges. It's all like everything is part of the hinges. Yeah, yeah.
Did they leave the APU in the tail?
There's no APU. That does not exist. APU is number 4 engine. So, and the thing is what they do is we do, and this is a problem, we do a huffer start, and that's one of the things. Who's familiar with the huffer start? Basically, it's the air compressor. So, you have to start your blades, with the compressor. So that's how we start the airplanes, with the compressor. And sometimes you go to places like in McConnell, and the compressor is a little anemic, so it's like, come on, crank it up. And it gets there eventually, but yeah, it's done by compressor, not by APU. We don't have an APU, it's number 4 engine. So in the summer, when it's really, really, really hot, and that's why we take pictures of the hump, because we're pretty much that door on the top for the escape hatch to go down. That's always open, that's our air conditioning. Go.
Well, I flew out of Payne for many years, and I love to see these coming and going, but thought people might be interested with the call sign you used.
Oh, same thing, giant.
Giant heavy.
Yeah,
That's cool.
Yeah, so I mean, we're heavies, we're 7.4, so we use the giant call sign. So always, they don't change the call sign because it's a Dreamlifter. And the thing is, what I really like about it is they said in the video, it's such an odd airplane that pretty much look at it and they say, we're rock stars. Literally, we land in Nagoya, Japan, there's kind of an observation deck on top of the terminal. They know we're coming in, and that thing is packed. I mean, like, people are literally taking pictures. So it is an eye catcher. There's only 4 in the world. And so during COVID, and let's go what I was talking about earlier, during COVID, we parked 2 out of the 4 airplanes. And the 2 airplanes we're operating, President Trump basically said, hey, you wanted to make that point that we can carry stuff. Unfortunately, the homework should have been made that, pretty much they wanted to go for the flash value of volume, because we can't carry that much stuff. I mean, and the stuff that we carry mainly was underneath in the cargo hold. So the stuff that's critical for temperature, we cannot carry it because it's non-pressurized and it's minus whatever 65 degrees out there, so.
Have you flown all 4 airframes?
Yep. Yeah, they're all the same. And the funny part about this is because they are older airframe, so they do maintenance to it. And I'll be honest with you, Painfield, top notch when it comes to the Boeing people. They know that airplane very well. Now you go to the other countries, not so much. So pretty much it behooves the pilot to know your airplane, be able to tell and go, yeah, I don't like that. But in Boeing, they know that airplane in and out. They're fantastic. So and that's why you notice, so because we're not flying out of Payne anymore, we're doing now the detour to go to Anchorage, to go to Charleston, because it's not a pilot base anymore in Payne. Before, we didn't go to Anchorage. We went from Payne to Nagoya, and Nagoya to Charleston, and from Charleston, we go to Toronto, Italy. So, go.
Because it's not a passenger plane, can you take friends?
Nope. Yeah, but it's going to be really cold in the Mach. You're really not going to enjoy it. Can't tell you how it feels like after 8 to 9 hours. No, unfortunately, and I tell you, when we do training, 4 people is really cramming that airplane. When you go to the bunk, you're pretty much shaking hands. It's pretty much that bad. Go.
When you've got horses and pigs, because I know you've told me stories about the animals that you sometimes transport, where did they go
We don't carry stuff like that. No, it's the only time we use it other than Boeing contract is to do that, the lifting that we did during COVID.
Okay.
That's it. And there basically were masks or all of that equipment that we carried in the lower cargo. We didn't carry it upstairs, we carried it in the lower cargo.
JF, N number of any of those airplanes, can you give me one?
November 747 BC.
They're all on Wikipedia.
Yeah. 249, 747.
BC, Bravo Charlie?
That's correct.
What was the flight crew? Like, did it depend on what the leg, what the destination, and where you were going to? Or?
When we did training, it's 4, but normally it's 3. Normally 3. 3 is very comfortable. 2 guys up front do the job, 1 in the bunk, because you don't have that room to spread. I mean, even if you go downstairs, it's cold. So we're trying to stay upstairs. So that cram of a space, you're trying to get the exercise, not going to happen. So don't bring your dumbbell, not going to happen. You don't have room for that. So, and it's even when we basically go, we're 4 of us in the hallway, putting our luggage into one of the compartments, like, excuse me, pardon me, very tight. Anything else?
The FAA listed as a 747-4 J6.
J6. That's a new one on me. Any question whatsoever? Hey guys, I took longer, my apologies, hope you enjoyed it. Yeah. If you have any other question, anytime.
Thank you, JF. That was good.